My name is Corley Phillips, and I'm the chair of Sierra Forward. And Les Francis is appearing here with us as well. He is the executive director of Sierra Forward. And we are delighted to have three people that are experiencing impact on counties firsthand, because we have Rosemarie Smallcombe, who is the chair of the Board of Supervisors in Mariposa County. We have Heidi Hall, who's the chair of the Board of Supervisors at Nevada County. And we have Jaron Brandon, who is the chair of the Board of Supervisors in Tuolumne County. So we have a pretty good geographic range. And I'm going to, oh, and by the way, I should give you a little housekeeping here. At the bottom of your screen, there's a button called Q&A. And the Q&A is how we're going to take questions. So if you have a question, submit it by clicking on the Q&A button there. I will be moderating that and then looking for, if there's a number of questions been asked in comment, those will drift up to the top in terms of, we'll try to get to everybody's questions, but we probably won't be able to. So I'm going to look for commonality first, for example. So having said all of that, I'm going to pose the first question here. Because what I'm interested in hearing, and I guess I will start with Rosemarie, but I'm going to ask all three of our panelists here. Have you seen impact on changes of federal spending in your county already, and how has that happened? What are you trying to do to mitigate that?
Well, yes, we have seen changes already. I would say that one of the largest ticket item, I'll say, is that, like my colleagues in Lake County and in Inyo County, we have discovered that we have lost about $5 million of a grant that had been approved for a fuel break around one of the communities in my district. And it appears that it was somehow connected to the concerns in the administration about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the grant was provided, or the contract associated with the grant was awarded to a woman-owned small business. So we've lost that $5 million. Our Health and Human Services Agency, which includes public health, environmental health, behavioral health, substance use disorder, that has lost somewhere around $3 million. There's nothing we can do about the grant, to the second part of your question, except continue to ask questions and hope that the funding may be reinstated or actually may come through. With respect to the reductions in funding in our Health and Human Services Agency, it means that we're going to have to shift around funding sources to try to cover the shortfalls that we're seeing on the public health side.
Great. And by the way, is it possible to appeal this? Is that part of the process of trying to get the grant back?
I'll defer to Heidi and Jaron, but in my experience, well, we none of us have this kind of experience, I don't think, in this particular environment. If you are not awarded a grant, it's certainly possible to go back and have conversations with agencies about why your score was, or why their determination didn't result in you receiving the grant. In this case, we're working with the Forest Service. They're our partner, and they have asked and asked, but as sometimes seems to be the case, these days, there's no response. And unfortunately, it's difficult to determine whether there's no response because they've made a decision and they just don't want to tell you, or whether there's no response because the people who would ordinarily be responsible to respond aren't there anymore. Forest Service, like the other federal agencies, has lost quite a number of staff.
Okay, Heidi, you want to take the next swing at this pitch?
Sure, and I think you're probably going to hear something very similar from all of us. But we also, so we know that the brick funding has been stopped, and then previous to that, there were, I believe, ARPA and infrastructure funding that had been stopped. So we've had, and things change a little bit every day. So we have, at last that I know, three projects that fire vegetation management, fuel breaks projects that were stopped completely and the funds appeared to be gone. We did try to appeal that, and my understanding is that um, some of those funds were restored. These were funds that were, already awarded, obviously, in the Biden administration, so we were able to get that back. But we also partner with the Forest Service, and the next step in this project was to do a NEPA review with the Forest Service staff, and that staff has been let go. And so there's no one to help us move that project forward. Obviously, some of these were years in the making, and the timing has been now. It may already be too late, that there's only a short time period when you can do this fuel break work before you get into the fire season. So if that doesn't get restored very quickly or resolved, then we won't have any of those projects move forward this year. Likewise, we're seeing the cuts and the effects in health and human services. Last week, I asked our budget, our CFO, about the impacts of public health, because if you watch the news, which is how we're getting our information, it seems, those public health programs like neonatal care and First Five, and anything that dealt with sort of infants and vaccines, those were cut immediately with no recourse. So we are doing similar to what Rosemarie said. We're trying to shift funds around. Our goal is, if a fund or projects get cut like that, where we know there's not likely any recourse, then we're going to accept when we're waiting to see what the state might be willing to come in and backfill. But in either case, there's no way they can backfill everything for everybody. So we're trying to provide a soft landing so that maybe we're ratcheting our services down over the years rather than simply abruptly stopping everything.
Great. Okay. Jaron, how about you?
Yeah, I think if I had a crystal ball to be able to predict what the next year is going to look like, I'd probably be a consultant paid several $1 millions a year to figure it out. Right now, I can only say that it's capacity loss, it's disruption, and it's creating immense state and federal conflict with any of these projects that have been very carefully negotiated. One major federal program that is of huge help to large federal land communities, and folks who are tuning in that might not know, community like mine is 80% federal lands. Those lands don't pay traditional property taxes. The secure rural schools and the PILT program, payment in lieu of taxes, those are very immediate financial effects. They're not subsidies in terms of charity or anything. It is a direct good neighbor payment for the loss of that revenue to support fundamentally roads and education and those types of things. So SRS being cut is definitely something that we're worried about. We've seen, amongst the hundreds of thousands of federal workers either being laid off or threatened to be laid off, 3,500 at least in the Forest Service, often in a relatively arbitrary way because they were probationary. We have a lot of people managing campgrounds, people that were doing timber harvest contracts, doing the studies under NEPA and federal environmental stuff to be able to work on forest projects. And I think our county has been very successful in navigating that. And yet, with things like Seral 2.0, which is this massive expansion of landscape scale restoration, fuel reduction, forest health projects. A lot of the funding is very confusing. We're losing some of the people that were the ones we relied on, as my colleagues mentioned. And even worse is that this is sending ripples through, I think, a lot of the federal workforce as it's time to jump ship. So one who is a friend of mine that works on these, again, timber harvest proposals, something that I think the President Trump had mentioned that this is something we got to do. We got to rake the forest, right, and do all of that. This is one of the people that actually create those plans, moving to a different job that now they're going to have to retrain somebody in the middle of these projects. We're also seeing when it comes to a lot of affordability programs like LIHEAP. LIHEAP goes and does home energy assistance and improvements, often for seniors and low-income residents. It has a climate and an energy and kind of social, benefit to it, but it's also just good business. It's more efficient use of resources. It helps those with what they really need to keep their costs down, especially while utilities going up. Programs like LIHEAP, programs like the National Civilian Community Corps, AmeriCorps, being cut is absolutely hurting us. And even though maybe there will be options with forest access and streamlining, what you end up doing with that at the end, the biomass energy, the green hydrogen, the value-added wood products, all of those are somewhat reliant on federal tax incentives. And so those projects are very much at risk as well.
Okay, thanks, Jaron. So the one of the lead stories on the front page of today's Sacramento Bee was about a grant that had been cut by NIH at UC Davis for they were 5 years into a 7-year study and the grant got cut. They filed an appeal. They got support from the Alzheimer's Association and others, and were able to get it restored. I take it no, you have not had any of that kind of experience yet.
I'll jump in. We've had a few instances. I think this administration has shown that it is trying to basically move fast and is, I guess, okay with breaking things. When there has been a lot of pushback on some of these actions, selectively, I've seen some of them be reversed, at least in some capacity. One example was some of the probationary employees when folks are rallying to the park. Tuolumne County is a 55,000 person community. We had over 800 people show up to the Hands Off rally and be able to talk about Michelle, who was a Forest Service worker that was laid off for no performance reasons whatsoever, that manages a lot of the campgrounds and other things here. It's conflicting, but it goes back and forth to where they're rehired. I think it's kind of sad that there is some willingness to do it based only on political pressure, but also that tends to be, I think, showing favoritism potentially to areas rather than based on need or based on objective metrics, based on are the right people getting loud about it that are considered to be voters or strategic, and the politics is invading that decision. So unfortunately, on a lot of the big stuff, I haven't seen any pulling back of that. On some of the small things, I have seen this activism and pushing work a little bit.
And I'll just,
Go ahead, Heidi.
oh, yeah, I will just say, I did mention that we did get some funding back, but it didn't help. And I would agree with Jaron that this is not the way. There's no equity or common sense or logic in how this might happen. And I'm now hearing from businesses, only one in my community, but from other communities nearby, businesses who are literally going bankrupt overnight because they're depending on imports from other countries for their products. So it's not just the impacts to the county, it's going to be the impacts to the community. And when the community ends up needing help, unemployment help or food assistance or workforce assistance, that also falls on the county. So there's going to be a lot of pain. We're already seeing pain, but there's going to be more, and it's going to be pretty widespread if any of this doesn't get reversed. And I have to say, even reversing it, I know I used to work in EPA and I'm on their alumni network, and I'm hearing from them. The best people who are left are leaving. They've been, like Jaron said, invited back and then put on leave again, and then put to work under someone who really has no respect for their work. And so those impacts we aren't even feeling yet, but there are a lot of impacts that I think are still to come.
Rosemarie, you want to add anything to that?
In terms of the part of the question about, reversing a grant. I can't say that it was reversing a grant, but there seems to be almost no rhyme or reason. My husband and I serve, as you probably know, Corley, on the board of directors for a nonprofit called the Upper Merced River Watershed Council. And we had a grant that was awarded by Bureau of Reclamation for $100,000. And our executive director went in to submit for reimbursement some invoices amounting to about $5,000, and she was told that no, basically she was shut out. Eventually, after she checked every morning, first thing for several days, if not weeks, it came through. We don't know why. We don't know why it was held up. We don't know why it came through ultimately. We were beneficiaries there, but I will tell you that UC Merced is next door to Mariposa County. And in talking with folks there, they're extremely concerned about grants that either have already been withheld or maybe withheld. UC Merced does a lot of work for Department of Energy, and there's a concern about what I call the hollowing out of academia, because they are heavily dependent on funding for research.
So there are three branches of government, last time I checked. And one of the questions was, where are the courts on this? Is this something that counties can seek the correction through the court system?
I'll answer for Mariposa County. We have a county council and an assistant county council who are fully burdened already. I suppose that it might be possible for Heidi and Jaron and I to get together with maybe 30 or 40 other counties and maybe think about filing a lawsuit. But to tell you the truth, our financial situation is bleak already. And to pull together the legal resources necessary to take on the federal government, I'm not optimistic that we could do it in the first place, and that we would be successful even were we to do so.
And I'm seeing a lot of head nods from Heidi and Jaron on that.
And say, and practically speaking, if a program has a period of time that the notice of funding is available for, you get denied on something, you go to court with it. And in a best case, that's going to take years, or even if a lower court issues an injunction, but then it's ignored, or the partners who are involved in that choose that this is too high risk, they don't want to invest anymore, undermining public-private partnerships. It's not really a practical option. I mean, similar to Supervisor Smallcombe, we have a very small council department. Rural governments generally have a lot of pressures. We have to perform the same functions as more urbanized areas. Now they've got more people calling in, so they've got more kind of spread, but they're able to also specialize. Where we have a legal counsel department of 5 people who are all taking on 4 or 5 separate areas of law. Often it costs us extra money out of pocket to hire specialized legal counsel. The same as if you went to a law firm and hired them to sue somebody. And this isn't small claims. This is massive constitutional issues that take huge amounts of resources to pull together. Now, I know that we do band together with the Rural County Association, with the California State Association of Counties, Cal Cities. We kind of have these unions of local governments that are paying very close attention and help to navigate that a bit. The National Association of Counties, of course, at the federal level. And the state is also suing over some of these provisions. Right now, it does feel a little bit like we're blowing in the wind, just trying to make sure that at the end of the day, things don't collapse. And it's already hard enough to keep our head above water as a rural community. Without businesses failing, without people wanting to stop projects, and without our revenue dropping off or hitting a forest fire that comes through because we delayed seasonal firefighter hiring and didn't have the resources to respond. It's really putting us at immense risk that it doesn't feel like we have a lot of agency over.
Got it. So the other branch of government is Congress. There's a lot of talk about the fact that Congress has the power of the purse. They're the ones that actually authorize these funds, right? What is Congress doing for you? How do you guys work with your congressmen? Mariposa and Tuolumne are in CD5, so that would be Tom McClintock. What's he doing about this?
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be very much. And that's really disappointing as a representative. I mean, look, whoever is in the presidency and whatever party they represent, they get things right and they get things wrong, right? And as local leaders, our job is to advocate. And I think as our federal representatives of us, their job is to listen and navigate that system. And unfortunately, what we've seen is, somebody who's been in office for a very long time making a point of constitutionality, right? Small government and limited executive authority and all these things seem to no longer have any of those concerns with something that really is somewhat of a constitutional crisis right now. You mentioned the courts, they might just get ignored. Congress dutifully approved legislation and funding getting pulled by executive order faster than basically the system can kind of keep up. So unfortunately, I think it's highly dependent on who's your representative right now. And many of them, I think, are very afraid to stand up on any of these topics. It's, I guess, somewhat reasonable that, we know that there's a war kind of against anybody that is trying to say, hey, actually, maybe this doesn't make sense. And yet, I think it's an abdication of the role that they have when they take office. I think there's also a lot of Republicans and independents and even some Democrats too that were frustrated with the system, ended up voting for this president, voted for this kind of, what they thought was going to happen, and are looking at it saying, why are we banning free speech? Where's the due process? These aren't political topics. These are kind of foundational topics. So I'm pretty disappointed in at least our federal congressional leadership for the things that have always been core, again, not partisan differences, things that have always been said, this is the stuff that I'm fighting for. The constitutionality, I don't know where that guy's been for the last 3 months.
So what I would say about Congressman McClintock is that he has a solution to our wildfire risk, which I think is not one that is shared by experts in forest management. His position is that the way that we get ourselves out of this problem is logging. So please to reinstate funding to build fuel breaks or do other types of vegetation management typically fall on deaf ears.
And there was one question about, is there any consideration of selling off federal lands as both, I guess, a fundraising thing as well as a let's dump this problem on somebody else?
So there's a rumor to the effect that, and I have no sense of how widespread the rumor is or whether there's any truth to it. I guess let me put it that way. But there has been a rumor to the effect that Yosemite National Park would be privatized.
Wow.
Mm.
So Heidi, I'm not sure Kevin Kiley is going to take your call, but how does your board work with Kevin Kiley, and what's he been doing relative to these impacts on funding approved by Congress?
Yeah, well, as of this week, I have taken my name off any letters to him, so there's no direct contact between myself and him. But prior to that, as chair of the board, it was my job to advocate for the board as a whole. And I will say that we have active members on our board who have several, 3 or 4 of them, who have actively, individually engaged with Kiley's staff, and that we as a board have sent multiple letters. We've made multiple phone calls. I think my colleague, Hardy Bullock, did get one meeting with Kiley, and some other folks may have had phone calls with him. But we did get the one piece of advice we got was to try to appeal these, and they would provide us the contact person in the agencies so we could try to appeal some of these cuts through the agencies. So you know, that's enough for him to get on a town hall and say, I'm trying to fix these things, but really it's not. Because what he needs to do is stand up against the administration, against all of these cuts, because again, advocating one by one, county by county is not the way we're going to get any kind of fire safe clearing done in any meaningful way. And I want to say, I'll say on the public lands, I've served on the Public Lands Committee at the National Association of Counties for a number of years. That committee has always advocated for privatizing public lands. And they were a majority. The folks who were asking for that were kind of a majority, but knew they couldn't get anywhere with the last administration. They've definitely ramped up their calls to do that in this under this administration. They probably are going to try to get NACO to advocate for that. They do have some power and connections to this administration, so it's a very real concern in my mind.
Somebody commented that Santa Clara County is working on suits about grant cuts, but Santa Clara County has a lot more money, I'm guessing, than Mariposa or Nevada or Tuolumne County. So is this something that is going to disproportionately impact rural counties just because of that?
Always. We are always the
Absolutely.
worst impacted.
Yeah, and I think I also was looking at the chat. Somebody mentioned RCRC. I don't know if RCRC has initiated a suit, and we all will be meeting next week or later this week, actually, with our CSAC association. And I'm sure that's a question that's going to come up. Does CSAC want to engage in any of this? But I would echo the comments that, you know, the Newsom administration is dealing with this. I guess some counties are. Unless we can unite as a group, and there is a group that works together sometimes for the counties on lawsuits. Unless we can unite, it's not something most of us can afford to do.
And in terms of, I think, rural counties being affected, you got to think, one, there's a reason why, and California is in a relatively better spot than actually a lot of the areas of the state, and this partisanship seems to be getting in the way of what are folks' actual interests there. We're lucky to, I guess, be in a donor state where we're talking about harm to our communities, and not an area where 80% of the dollars that come in are federal, and those are getting slashed. And I think they're going to have a real awakening of the importance of these programs. And yet in our communities where we're dealing with, per capita addiction and housing insecurity and fire risk, we have high senior populations, we have high veteran populations. This isn't even looking into cuts to Medicaid or veteran service staffing, cuts to rural health programs or Native American programs in the Bureau of Internal or Department of the Interior. We are always impacted more by these programs because we are lower income, we are high in federal programs, we have a number of issues, and this is something that I think will be presented to the state is, will the state take leadership in backfilling many of these issues, while unfortunately it seems the federal administration is, in the name of an ideology and a party, leaving rural communities behind in a significant way. And I think there's a lot of frustration by that. I hear folks who are maybe afraid to go post online. They're afraid to go kind of put their name to it for people coming back and attacking them. But quietly, we'll talk about, this isn't right. Something is not normal with this. I'm actually worried about my programs, my benefits, my family, my neighbors. And I think that's something that you didn't see a year ago. You saw excitement. You saw, we're going to get, what we want. Now there's a bit of a pause on that type of energy.
So one of the things that I'd like to explore is, how is this going to impact the election cycle between now and November of 2026? Is this a chance for some issues that are impacting rural communities to get more attention, or is it going to get buried, with whatever, Santa Clara being able to afford to fight suits that you can't?
I think the bigger thing that we're seeing now in terms of the congressional cycle is that there's a lot of people looking to get in early and push back against this administration. And the concerns are across the board. You know, number one, what's happening and how to stop it and get some regular order and lawfulness being part of how Congress works, getting Congress to take back its powers to control tariffs and to do the budget and to provide resources to our communities. That's the number one thing I would say. So in that measure, rural counties are going to be right in the mix, which they often aren't. I think you're going to see the impacts everywhere, but in the rural communities, they might be more severe, and that might get some more press and news. And folks, excuse me, folks in urban and suburban areas try to recreate in these more rural areas. And with parks get closed and fires happen, and there's not enough funds for preventing them or cleaning them up, they're going to be losing access to the areas that they also love. So I think there is this opportunity for rural areas to get a little more attention, but really the issues are so big and across the board that it's going to be it's everyone's problem right now.
And I would agree with Heidi. I think, well said, Heidi. I think it's really the ability of candidates to articulate the issues that will be confronting populations throughout the state, throughout the nation, but articulate them in a way that folks in our own communities can relate to the problems they're seeing and the need for change to back to some greater semblance of normalcy.
And my entire life, I know I've seen, the charge talking about how there used to be Republicans more liberal than the most conservative Democrats and kind of a crossover. And that has completely split. And I'm hoping that what I'm seeing is a lot of, again, energy and a lot of people who have not engaged in politics before, who thought institutions, betrayed me. They're not worth trust. I'm going to scrutinize, and be skeptical of everything. And to an extent, rightly so, over the last 30 years, starting to see, okay, no, but facts have to matter. And there are things above partisanship that are more important with it. And again, I'm blessed to be on a panel, and we've been on a few before too, but with two people that I consider some of the smartest folks that I know, with Rosemarie and Heidi. I'm relatively newer into this. I've been on the board for 5 years. These are the folks that I go to when I have questions and advice. And seeing folks stepping up to be on panels to spread information. And I know that Shishai wanted to mention it too, and I might get in trouble, Heidi, don't get mad at me. But Heidi is one of those people stepping up for these rural communities to take that fight to Congress, to be able to make sure that we have an advocate and a fighter in there that's able to stand up for us, and has announced, I believe it's CD3. And I don't want to, I know you don't want to, you want to focus on the issues here with it. I just want to say that is inspiring. If anything out of it, all of this energy, all these people stepping up, we also have leaders stepping up to bigger roles that are trying to push back and see, with everything that's broken right now, is there maybe an opportunity for folks to come together on these issues that we all care about, rather than every single thing being quite as divisive and quite as partisan. And if you win, I lose. If I win, you lose. I'm also going to be running for the state Senate in District 4 for the same reason, that we need leaders with integrity that can bring people together. So maybe that could be a silver lining coming out of this, that people reject this type of vitriol.
Well, actually, one of the questions was, does the panel think that these program shortfalls are going to translate to political vulnerability in people running for Congress? I presumably Heidi thinks that's the case. Maybe I'll let Rosemarie take the first shot at that.
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, and I see Les has his hand up, and I'll defer to him on any political analysis. But I think the vulnerabilities come to the extent that we have candidates that can step forward and truly articulate the pain that people are feeling and lay out a path forward that is different from what we're experiencing right now.
Les, since you have your hand up, did you want to chime in on that?
Well, I wanted to chime in on an earlier point. I mean, on this point, the evidence, there's obviously a great deal of activism, even in rural counties. The question is it enough to swing those 5 or 6 or 7 points in the middle that we need to win these races? But I have a question specifically for Rosemarie, and the others may want to chime in. But Rosemarie, Yosemite Park is one of the 3 national parks in Clintock's district, and the most popular by far of all of them. In talking to folks a few weeks ago, already the cutbacks, the number of rangers taking money when you go into the park, or the backcountry rangers and whatnot. What is happening with Yosemite, and what is the perspectives for this coming tourist season?
So I'll make a few points, Les, and then you can tell me whether I'm on the right track. There, early on, the park was told that they could proceed with instituting the reservation system again. And then I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, they were told no. And I've been in meetings a couple times over the last couple weeks with senior folks from Yosemite National Park, and they hear nothing to suggest that that the reservation system will be reinstituted. What the other thing I can tell you, and I saw evidence of it today, is that folks have been encouraged to retire early, and your choice is: do you retire at the end of this month, or do you retire at the end of May? There are really senior people who are essentially being told to leave. The other point that I'll make, you mentioned taking tickets at the gate. In January, the park management was told that they couldn't bring seasonals in. And for people who know Yosemite National Park, you know that park staff typically is about 800 folks at full staffing. And they double in size with seasonals during the summer season. In January, again, they were told that they couldn't hire seasonals. And then I think it was about a month later, they were told that they could, which obviously means that they have less time to recruit and train people. So I have a lot of concerns about the numbers of seasonal folks who will actually give up their job in, I don't know, pick a place in Las Vegas to come work in Yosemite, when the period of time that they'll actually be employed will be shortened by 2 or 3 months. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that we're seeing.
And Corley, to also Les's point about, is it going to swing it? I think, again, there are some issues that are getting past the partisanships. You mentioned, the first question we started with, what are the impacts? Well, we both have, with Mariposa and Tuolumne County, huge economic interests in Yosemite. Beyond it's just being public lands and a treasured place. It supports a large portion of our economy. And seeing international tourism drop off so substantially, where a lot of, I think, across these areas, we've seen a 20% reduction. This isn't even just with the tariffs and everything, but not wanting to maybe visit the country and view this landmark. That's something that if you're a business owner who maybe voted for the Trump administration and voted for an agenda you thought that was, pro-business and pro-forestry and pro-fire and safety and all of that, I think we've got our own sphere. We've got kind of maybe our tribe, like the state, and then we've got ourselves as a nation. Some folks are seeing at the national level things that are very concerning about what the founding fathers talked about in the system that they set up. We're seeing stuff at the state level that's concerning others, where a disaster might have recovery money with strings attached. And we're having to play political games to be treated, I think, fairly with it. I think the last bit will be when this starts impacting people's sphere, their friends, their family, their neighbors, that they may have a medical payment or their business is affected. I know that there's a lot of farmers and agricultural folks and mining folks and natural resource extraction folks that this tariff is putting an immense squeeze on their business, their ability to hire, their ability to plan, their ability to make a basic profit. That's going to give people a really good opportunity to, I think, reconsider, is winning worth losing?
Someone posted that in El Dorado County, there's been a 30% decrease in total tax revenue. Are you guys seeing similar kinds of drop-offs? And what has that translated to in terms of cuts to programs and personnel?
Well, I guess I can start. That is a topic of considerable conversation right now, Corley. Last Tuesday and Wednesday, we went through our budget hearings. And right now for our CFO, CAO is forecasting a drop in TOT revenue by about $4 million. Typically, we get somewhere a little above 20 million, so 22-23 million dollars a year in TOT revenues. This year we're forecasting a little bit under 20 million. The bookings look good right now. And so it's reasonable to assume that $20 million is achievable. But as I think Heidi and for anybody from El Dorado County, Jaron will all agree, the difficulty is, when is the next disaster going to hit and where is it going to hit? Because we can see significant drops in our TOT revenues as a function of those disasters.
There's some floods.
Yeah.
I guess I'll say I'm going as chair of the board. We do things a little differently than some other counties. We have the chair and the vice chair spends 2 to 3 weeks going through every single part of the budget, and then we bring it to the board in sort of a bigger package. So I'll be starting those budget talks in 2 weeks, and we'll be looking at the potential tax impacts. To date, I don't know what those look like for us. We are dependent on tourism, probably not nearly as much as Rosemarie is. So we'll have to see what those are. Yeah.
And I think kind of going back to an early question is, what are we doing as local leaders to be able to step up and say there's harm? When there were things under the Biden administration or under the Newsom administration that I think were not good for rural communities, we step up, we advocate. It's not about how you vote in the election. It's about how the policy impacts your community. And right now, I think that question goes to Stanislaus, to El Dorado, to the Sierras and the mountains, is where we're seeing direct negative impacts. Are we stepping up to say, this is hurting us? This is a better way to do it? Are you listening to local leaders? And right now, the answer doesn't seem to be that they are listening, but we do have local leaders speaking out on it, which is at least a start, at least some of them.
There's an interesting question about can say California start withholding funds to the federal government? I believe the answer to that is it is true that California contributes more to the federal budget than it gets back from the federal budget, but those contributions are individual and corporate taxes that can't be diverted. So I don't believe there's a way of striking back, but if anybody's got any good ideas, I'm open to it.
So let me just say this. I'm sure that Heidi and Jaron have had conversations with the representative from the governor's office. The governor's office has outreach folks who connect with chairs as they take office, at least in the rural counties, I think, was what I was told. I know they've done it in prior years. And I was on the phone with her. I think that with our local representative, I think the issue is really, how much risk do you want to take? It's one thing to file a suit against the government, the federal government, because of the imposition of the tariffs. I think it's another thing to say that we refuse to pass on those kinds of revenues to the federal government. I'm afraid that it would become a um, a huge battle that would move attention away from where we're really feeling the pain, which is in the funding that we look to receive in order to provide services to our constituents. So while it's an appealing idea at some level, I think we need to stay laser focused on finding means um, to find funding and to introduce greater stability for our constituents, not greater tumult.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I mean, I would agree with Rosemarie. Our jobs are to try to get the resources to our community, to find ways to work with the state, that we can help each other mitigate the impacts that are coming down, and then advocating like hell, honestly, with our representative. We need, to my mind, we need to use every single avenue. We are advocating as hard as we possibly can to our representative. We're also advocating as hard as we can in our organizations, CSAC and RC and NACO. And then we're each obviously finding our lane personally as to how we're going to step up and push back on this. But I am not interested in trying to figure out how to navigate multiple lawsuits while also trying to simply keep the resources flowing to our neediest people, to our food banks, to our Meals on Wheels, to our vaccination programs, to our emergency support, to our funds to protect ourselves when there is an emergency. These are really life issues. They're on the ground issues about people being able to stay in their homes, keep their kids in school and not being bullied. Another issue that's coming up, keeping their family fed, keeping their businesses open. Those are the real issues that we're feeling every single day, and that where the fear and the concern is coming from my constituents. They're afraid of what is coming next, and we need to stay focused on how to best support them with whatever we have and whatever we have left while we do other things to change the system at the top.
Well said. Okay, Les, you have your hand up.
I was just going to add to the earlier point. The political irony here is that I would guess every rural county, by definition, voted for Trump in 2024 across the country. I don't mean just in California. And while it would take a lot of effort, it seems to be not only outreach in California to other rural county supervisors and local officials to fight the battle from a statewide standpoint, is the national possibilities here. I mean, rural counties across the country are experiencing the same kinds of challenges that you all are facing, some even more so, and somehow getting to them to try to educate their constituents and their voters between now and November 2026. I think it ought to be a priority of somebody, whether it's NACO or I don't know who it is, but there are rural counties, Appalachia and even the western states, Mountain West, that ought to need to step up with their representatives too.
Well, and to jump in, because I think we've had a lot of conversation here about Trump administration, the Republican Party. This also has to be reflected back. And look, I'm a Democrat. I represent a very conservative rural area, much of the mountains of California. If you're listening and you're not familiar, it's a very red area. But people have things that they want to see done, as Heidi was mentioning. There's, the food banks, the housing assistance, the jobs. I mean, people want to be able to live their life. And when it affects that, I think we have an opportunity to discuss. We have to, I don't want to take it to say that we have to have a point to come in and provide the education, because I think the info is out there. The issue that's coming out has been, I think, folks who have not felt heard. And in part, there has to be some recognition that within, I think, the current politics and within the Democratic Party, I know as a rural representative, I'm frequently frustrated with the state of California as one of the richest states in the richest countries in the world, with the level of poverty and addiction that we face, the inability sometimes to solve, while these other things are going fantastic. The GDP of the state, for example, I mean, we're a massive producer, and yet I look in my community at the small businesses that are very much struggling with cost of living and compliance. So all to say that I think the conditions that have created this type of movement, that created this type of leadership and administration, is something that is not all about one individual. It is something that we have to listen to the core reasons of why did people feel so alienated, so left out, that they chose to disengage from that system and go and join someone who made very large promises. They voted for things that sounded good and sounded specific and direct and simple. And now we're seeing that it's not that simple, that these things are more complicated, or that these policies aren't actually in their interest. And talked a little bit before about, well, what's this going to look like in 26? All that is presented right now, I think, is an opportunity to make that connection with our neighbors again. And we have to be able to do that. But an opportunity doesn't inherently mean that it's taken advantage of. As I think Heidi had mentioned as well, what are we all individually doing in our capacity to re-engage folks, whether it's running for office, or whether it is helping a campaign, or it's talking to your neighbors, or it's being able to have, support a business and listen to what those folks are saying in it. We all have a role in taking advantage of that opportunity to hopefully bring that conversation back to where we're not losing people that feel like they don't have a home within, I think, a group of folks that are fighting for them, but maybe aren't communicating it as bad as possible. And apparently my answer was so long that Heidi timed out.
No, she's back.
There we go.
Well, that's a great wrap up, Jaron. I appreciate it. And in fact, what I was going to do in the what do we have? 5 minutes left is just to ask if there's any closing remarks that you all want to add. So, Rosemarie, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quickly, two things. One is that we are very concerned about the health of our nonprofit sector. Our nonprofit sector here is very small. We've been fostering it for certainly the whole time I've been in office, because we need those partners out in the community. And with some of the funding cuts, we're very concerned about the continued strength of our nonprofit sector. The other thing that I'll mention is that I don't think that we will see the full impact of what has happened, let's say, with respect to the Park Service and the Forest Service, probably for a generation. I expect that our community character will change considerably because we are losing folks. They will pick up and they will move back to some other place, most likely. And it will change the nature of our community. It will change the attendance at our schools. It will change the discourse in our community. So there are some long-term ramifications that I think we'll see unfold in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I have to emphasize that by nonprofit, she means intentionally nonprofit, because there's a lot of small businesses that are currently nonprofit, but not by choice.
Yes, I mean intentionally nonprofit.
Anyway, Heidi, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I would say that I mean, I was looking at the comments too, and there's, a lot of fear out there too. I can echo what Rosemarie said. It's our nonprofits I'm worried about. It's our businesses. It's individual homeowners. It's our elderly. It's our vulnerable. It's our veterans. There's a lot of people I'm worried about. And there are three things I want to emphasize. Two of them are things we all need to do. We all need to push back, every one of us, find our lane when we're rested, because a lot of people are exhausted from the last election. Number two, we need to be part of continuing to educate people on what's really happening. There is so much misinformation out there. That's part of the political divide that Jaron was speaking about. Some people really believe the misinformation they're being fed. And so we need to do everything we can to continue to tell the truth wherever and whenever we can, hoping that that breaks through at some point. And then the third thing, because we're on this county panel, I want to say is to help us and help each other understand where this is coming from. This is not neighbors doing it to each other. This is not the city or the county failing our constituents. This is not even the state failing our constituents. This is a federal government that is intent on breaking the system that has worked for 250 years with lots of problems and lots of flaws. It's intent on breaking it, and it's intent on breaking it so that they can give tax breaks to billionaires. This is about propping up the wealthy and letting the rest of us fall away. And when we're educating and when we're resisting and when we're pushing back, we need to be clear about who we're pushing back on. And the rest of us at the lower levels need to stick together. The vets, the women, the young, the old, the local agencies, the nonprofits, and the state and local governments. We need to be in this together, and let's help us not get into this place where we're fighting each other over the minimal resources that are left. Let's focus on fixing the problem where it lies, and that is currently at the federal level, and with billionaires and multimillionaires who are so deeply influencing this administration.
Well, that's a great wrap up, and it's perfect timing because we try to limit to an hour, and we have hit the 1 hour mark. So we're going to conclude at that. I posted this answer, but we will be putting this up on our website, and we have a highly motivated helper to get the video ready so we can get it up. That little hand you saw. So anyway, we will get this up on the www.sierraford.com website for those of you who want to see it again, and as well as people that contacted us asking if they couldn't make it and how do they get it. So it will be available. I want to thank Rosemarie and Jaron and Heidi for a very interesting and enlightening discussion, and look forward to doing more of these in the future.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. It was a good conversation.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.